Hello, I'm Avi Lewis. Welcome back to On the Map. As we saw earlier in the ethanol-fueled zeal of former CIA Director Jim Woolsey, the United States is obsessed with breaking its dependence on Middle East oil. Ethanol is one business feeding off that obsession, but it's only a small and mostly future solution to America's energy demands. Right now, the real answer is still oil. Oil that's right here in Canada. More specifically, in Alberta's tar sands.
Canada is an emerging energy superpower.
America is addicted to oil.
We talked about some significant initiatives in that area that we're going to work on over the next few months.
Hi, how are you doing?
Keeping America competitive requires affordable energy.
We certainly are very anxious that the oil sands development be as swift as possible.
The tremendous growth of our energy sector.
What a blessing to find all those resources underneath Canada that we can share.
If Americans are looking for security of supply, they need to look no further than to north of the 49th parallel.
Canada intends to be a player.
We've never met a pipeline we didn't like.
The United States' largest energy supplier is its largest trading partner, its best friend, an enduring democracy that believes in free markets and binding contracts.
We don't have to send our kids to foreign lands to defend those sources of oil.
Alberta has often been called the Texas of the North, and we take that as a compliment.
So, what are the implications for Canada and for the planet of treating the oil sands as America's security blanket? In a moment, we'll speak to a former federal minister of both industry and foreign affairs. But first, Diana Gibson of the Parkland Institute at the University of Alberta. She joins me now from Edmonton. Diana, welcome to On the Map.
Thank you, Avi.
Okay, so America's got a big energy problem, and we're the solution. How are the oil sands changing Canada's role on the world stage?
Well, there's a couple of key factors that make Alberta's oil sands incredibly strategic globally right now. First, that most of the world's oil-producing nations have chosen to maintain strategic control over their oil resources by extracting and processing them themselves. So the foreign multinational corporations cannot get access to that oil. That's 80% of the world's oil, which is off limits to them. So Alberta's tar sands are one of the few places that they can actually go. And second, of course, globally, within that 20%, oil is harder and harder to find. So that means it's high risk and high cost exploration, which the tar sands are not. There's no risk. We know where the tar sands oil is. Back in the day, they talked about the scramble for Africa in terms of colonial terms. And I think that right now we're seeing the scramble for the tar sands. Nations around the world are vying for strategic positions within Alberta's tar sands. And companies like Statoil from Norway have just bought in, and Japan and Korea are trying to. So it does make Canada's position globally quite different than it was prior to the tar sands becoming so prominent.
Give me a snapshot of how Canada is acting differently globally because of the oil sands.
Well, for example, the softening of our position on Kyoto, I think, is very linked to the interests of the extraction sector and the fact that the tar sands have been exempt from even intensity-based targets for climate change emissions. Canada has chosen to integrate further and further with the U.S. and increase exports to, and basically putting all of our eggs in one basket. A strategic foreign policy or a strategic energy policy would include diversifying our buyers, and Canada isn't doing that. The U.S. has made it clear that they would like to significantly increase their reliance on Alberta's and Canada's oil and use that to reduce their dependence on Mideast oil by 75% by 2025. So Canada is increasingly integrated and choosing to become more and more so, and it makes us vulnerable to be so reliant on the one particular country.
Right. So what would happen if we just decided to scale back a bit, to send the United States a little bit less oil?
Well, currently we can't do that. We are required under NAFTA to maintain the proportion of exports that we are exporting right now. So, for example, in natural gas, we export 56% of our natural gas, even though we have less than 10 years of reserve. We cannot scale that back without cutting Canadian consumption as well, and we have to maintain the ratio to the United States. So, the only solution really is to exit that clause in NAFTA. And Mexico is exempt from all of those energy provisions, including proportional sharing under NAFTA.
Let's talk about energy security. I mean, the oil sands are the jewel for the United States because it's seen as the key to America's energy security in the future. What are the implications for massive exploitation of the oil sands for Canada's energy security?
Well, you know, Canada talks about, the federal government's been talking about becoming an energy superpower, but we've gone the opposite direction. No other developed nation has the kind of foreign ownership that we have. Over half of the assets in our oil and gas sector are foreign owned. So to be an energy superpower, the other nations are choosing to maintain strategic control. Canada already imports 50% of our oil, and in the East, in the Maritimes, in Quebec, it's 90% is imported from those same vulnerable Mideast sources that the U.S. is trying to wean themselves off of. So strategically, Canada is very vulnerable. There is no pipeline that goes across Canada that doesn't go through the U.S. And, you know, to give an indication of how an energy superpower like the U.S., which is a superpower in so many ways, chooses to control their sector, they, when China tried to buy Unicol, Congress stepped in and made sure that it was bought at a lower bid by an American company. So that's the way that strategic control is maintained, and Canada has chosen not to do that.
Diana, thanks for being on the map.
Thank you very much, Avi.